In the basement of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, there is a carved limestone stele that most visitors never see. It sits in a side gallery, partially obscured, surrounded by objects deemed more significant by the curators who arranged them. Most people walk right past it, but hidden inside it is something that shouldn't exist. A single carved sentence that collapses the entire accepted timeline of the Giza plateau and points directly to a structure beneath the pyramid that no one has been fully permitted to excavate. The stele is called the Inventory Stele. Discovered in 1858 by French archaeologist Auguste Mariette during excavations near the Temple of Isis at Giza, it was controversial from the moment it was uncovered, not because of what it depicted, but because of what it stated. The stele bears the cartouche of the pharaoh Khufu, the man officially credited with constructing the Great Pyramid. And it says, clearly, that Khufu found the Sphinx already standing when he arrived at the plateau. Not built it, found it. Already there, already ancient. Not a myth, not a metaphor. For decades, scholars dismissed it as symbolic. A later composition, they said, propaganda carved by Sate period priests to elevate the prestige of the Isis temple complex. The stele was catalogued, shelved, and quietly removed from the center of the conversation. But that explanation has a problem, because the Inventory Stele is not the only ancient source placing advanced construction at Giza before the 4th dynasty. It is one of several. And when you line them up together, a pattern emerges that conventional archaeology has never fully answered. And if that's true, it means our history is missing a chapter. Here's where it gets strange. Around the same time the Inventory Stele was being dismissed, a separate body of ancient texts was being translated in southern Egypt, carved inside the Temple of Edfu, dating to the Ptolemaic period, but explicitly describing events from an era the scribes called the Time of the Gods. Scholars named them the Edfu Building Texts. For most of the 20th century, Egyptologists treated them as pure cosmological allegory, sacred poetry, ritual formula. But then modern science found something that changed everything. If you're new here, subscribe now. What we're about to build is not a single anomaly. It's a convergence of 3 separate lines of evidence: textual, geological, and electromagnetic, all pointing to the same location beneath the Giza plateau. And the Edfu texts appear to describe it in language that isn't poetry. It reads like documentation. The Edfu Building Texts run to more than 5,000 lines. Most of it is ceremonial formula, but embedded within them is a specific passage translated by British Egyptologist Dr. Eve Raymond in 1969, describing the construction of what the scribes call the Great Primeval Mound. They say it was raised on a specific island of hard stone, that it contained the seat of the first occasion, that beneath it existed a sacred enclosure where a force described only as the great light of the first time was generated and preserved. The structure, according to the texts, was not built by pharaohs. It was built by a group called the Shebtiu, divine architect builders who existed before the current human age. For decades, scholars dismissed that as cosmological allegory, but that explanation has a problem. When you translate the physical dimensions referenced in the Edfu texts, the depth of the enclosure, the composition of its walls, the orientation of its descending shaft, they align with uncomfortable precision to the subterranean chamber beneath the Great Pyramid. Not similar, not inspired by it, the same. Clue 1. The texts describe the foundation as resting on a bed of water that does not move. Mainstream scholarship read this as a reference to the Nun, the primordial ocean of Egyptian cosmology. Poetic, mythological, safe. But in 1993, a ground-penetrating radar survey conducted by a joint team from Waseda University in Tokyo identified a series of anomalous cavities directly beneath the Giza plateau, buried between 25 and 30 meters below the surface. These cavities were filled not with sand or loose sediment, but with water. A subterranean aquifer, still active, still present, running in a precise east to west orientation directly beneath the central pyramid complex. The texts didn't describe a myth. They described a geological feature. They weren't guessing. They were recording. Clue 2. The Edfu texts describe the inner chamber as constructed from stone that holds the fire of the earth within it. The mainstream interpretation, granite, chosen for its sacred red color and ceremonial significance. But granite is not only symbolically significant, it is physically significant. Granite contains between 25 and 45% quartz crystal, and quartz is piezoelectric. Under mechanical pressure, quartz crystals generate measurable electrical charge. The king's chamber inside the Great Pyramid is lined entirely with Aswan red granite. Every wall, every ceiling block, every floor slab. The chamber bears no inscription, no decoration, no painting, and no hieroglyph. It was not built as a gallery. It was not built to impress visitors. And under 6 million tons of overlying stone, the quartz within that granite is under continuous mechanical compression. Here's where it gets strange. In 2003, acoustician John Stuart Reid conducted resonance experiments inside the king's chamber using directional speakers and a cymatics visualization plate. He found that the chamber resonated at a dominant frequency of approximately 440 Hz, a frequency that produced standing wave patterns in the chamber geometry, measurable and repeatable. The room was not built to house a body. The room was tuned, and the precision required to tune a stone chamber of those dimensions and materials is not accidental. It is engineered. Clue 3. The Edfu texts describe a final structural element, a vertical shaft they call the path of the hidden light, connecting the upper structure to the lower enclosure. For generations, this was interpreted as a metaphor for the soul's descent into the underworld. But the Great Pyramid contains exactly such a shaft, the so-called well shaft, the narrow descending passage that connects the upper gallery system to the bedrock below the pyramid's base. It leads nowhere the conventional architectural plan of the pyramid requires. No burial chamber waits at the bottom. No inscription marks its walls. No official explanation fully accounts for its existence. It was sealed. It was mapped. And then it disappeared from mainstream discussion. Then, in 2017, something broke open. A multinational research team using muon particle tomography, the same technology used to image the interior of active volcanoes, detected a massive void inside the Great Pyramid, sitting above the Grand Gallery. Roughly 30 meters long, confirmed independently by 3 separate detector arrays, the discovery was published in the journal Nature in November of that year. But here is what received almost no mainstream coverage. The same detector team noted secondary density anomalies not in the upper structure, but in the region directly below the pyramid's subterranean chamber floor. Readings consistent with a shaped architectural space in the bedrock. Not a natural cavity, a constructed one. Not an empty cave, a shaped space. In 1987, the Waseda University team applied for formal permission to conduct deep, ground-penetrating radar surveys directly beneath the subterranean chamber floor. The Egyptian Antiquities Organization granted initial approval. The team arrived at Giza with equipment, and then the permission was revoked. No explanation was provided in writing. The team departed. Their partial data, collected before the shutdown, was never published in a peer-reviewed journal. The lead researcher gave a single interview to a Japanese newspaper in 1989, describing anomalies in the subfloor readings that he called architecturally consistent with a constructed space. He never commented publicly on the Giza project again. The report was ignored, or something more deliberate. Now, does this prove the most extreme version of the story? Probably not. But that doesn't make the discovery ordinary. The mainstream explanation, that the subterranean chamber was simply an abandoned burial plan, a design Khufu changed midway through construction, does not account for the Waseda anomalies. It does not explain the acoustic engineering of the king's chamber. It does not explain why the well shaft exists, or why a living aquifer runs at precisely the depth the Edfu texts describe. Each of these things has a conventional explanation in isolation, but all of them together, that's a different question entirely. Here is what the convergence suggests, not as speculation, but as a testable hypothesis. Beneath the Great Pyramid, below the bedrock floor of its subterranean chamber, there is a constructed space. It sits above a natural aquifer. Its walls, if consistent with the upper chambers, would be granite, piezoelectric granite, under pressure, above moving water. A system capable, in theory, of converting geological resonance and acoustic energy into directed electrical output. And if that interpretation is correct, then the Edfu Building Texts were not cosmological poetry. They were a technical manual for a machine we have forgotten how to read. The builders who designed this, whoever came before the Old Kingdom scribes who recorded the memory of them, understood resonance. They understood subsurface hydrology. They understood the electrical properties of stone. Under compression, they selected a site where all three conditions converged naturally, and they built a structure to amplify that convergence. That is not the behavior of a civilization building monuments to dead kings. That is the behavior of engineers. And the machine they built is still there. Right now, beneath the Giza plateau, the aquifer flows in the dark. The granite blocks of the king's chamber sit under incomprehensible pressure, their quartz crystals vibrating in frequencies no one is measuring. The well shaft descends into bedrock that has never been fully imaged. The void above the grand gallery remains sealed, unsampled, and unexplained. And somewhere below the subterranean chamber floor, in a space that radar found and authority then buried, something waits that the Shebti built, or that someone built. In an age so distant, the Egyptians themselves could only call it the time of the gods. The Inventory Stele is still in the Cairo Museum, still in a side gallery, still partially obscured, still waiting for someone to ask not who built the Great Pyramid, but what it was built to do. If this cracked something open for you, hit the like button and subscribe. There is far more here than one video can carry. The next one goes deeper, into the shaft systems beneath the plateau and the ancient texts that describe what was supposed to be sealed inside them. You don't want to miss where this leads.